I would say we're more alike than different, and we get caught up on the external of our physicality to separate us, and in doing that, that makes us not see the whole world in the connectedness that we are, and it separates us and creates this division. And I feel like as human beings, we haven't learned from our history and our past, and we're still fighting over the same things that we've been fighting over since the dawn of man, and it's halting our progress from us being the super beings that we could actually be. And even on a bigger scale of something that's happening right now, it's scary that we're still infighting with each other on the planet over resources and who looks like what and who has access to this. And then if we really don't get it together, we're going to cause our own extinction, and we will not have a planet to live on, and we will not even be here, because Mother Nature will wipe us out and take us off the face of the earth, and then we won't even be able to fight between each other anymore because we won't be here.
It's a strange combination, sort of that we're both, I think, deeply noble beings, but at the same time deeply vulnerable beings. And much of the challenge of human life, which I hope philosophy can help us, grapple with and figure out, is to how to be both of those things, right? And not sort of embrace one at the expense of the other. That those who are down on earth ashamed or worried about the vulnerable part don't have to feel worry or shame. Those who are anxious about the noble part, they don't need to feel worry or shame either. Those are sort of the coexistent features of the strange human creatures that we are, and we live best when we live with both of those things.
Yeah. Let the machines have the jobs. Let them have it. At least the current jobs, or the easy jobs, or the jobs that don't need a full-fledged human to do. It makes me really sad when I see, especially in Mexico, it's this way. They'll just hire someone to just like stand somewhere all day long. In Mexico, labor is quite cheap, so they can do that. Or there'll be 5 people just like at a parking garage, just watching it.
Right.
And I understand that you need a lot of education. It's a great privilege to do knowledge work, to do creative work, but it really makes me sad when I see a human, the most precious, complex thing in the universe, being dedicated to just being a stationary object. And I kind of see it as my mission to make knowledge work universal.
That's good.
To make it accessible to everyone who wants to do it, basically.
Keeping an open mind towards the people that look different from us until we get to know them is healthy.
Yes.
Healthy for our also ability to gain new relations and perhaps take advantage of opportunities that these people represent to us.
The biggest realization that I had over the course of my life, the thing which is fundamental to everything else, is I had to break down the illusion that we were civilized people that lived in a nice place. Because, as a child of the 70s and 80s in Britain, BBC reality was reality.
Yes.
And BBC reality is we're civilized people and we live in a nice place and history is kind of on our side, but it's quite difficult sometimes. Stiff upper lip, right?
Yeah.
And, it's taken me literally into my 40s to be able to completely dismantle that illusion, right? We are not civilized people that live in a nice place. We are absolute bastards that live in hell.
Right.
Right?
Interesting.
And you see that when you look at statistical reality, right? You get away from the media story, you get away from the pictures, you get away from the things which people are paid to teach you, right? And you just look, how many kids will starve to death this year? And it's a lot.
What is the bare minimum metric?
Yeah, right? Yeah. Maternal mortality, right? America's maternal mortality, the number of women that die in childbirth in America, is crazy bad.
Oh yeah.
It's crazy
and we
bad.
won't even get down to reasons of being of like healthcare or insurance companies and all that stuff. But like the fact of the matter is that more women die in the United States than any other developed country in the world.
And there's your bedrock, right?
That is crazy.
And then you say civilized people that live in a nice place, yes, no, right? Well, the numbers say not civilized people that live in a nice place.
Right.
Right? The numbers say bastards that live in hell. Right?
Damn.
25% of the world's prisoners and 5% of the world's people.
Yep.
Right? Excuse me,
but
did you say
the free, right?
See what I'm saying, right? So that sawing through the civilized people that live in a nice place mythology and accepting that it's bastards that live in hell if you model the human race as bastards that live in hell, we're actually doing pretty well.
Right.
Right?
We're getting better every year, or it seems to be in those kind of things.
Down from the caves for 5,000 years, we've managed to nuke ourselves. We seem to be freaking out about the climate thing at an appropriate scale a bit late.
Right.
The level of freaking out about climate that we're doing now, we probably should have done in about 95.
Sure, yeah.
But a 20-year lag is not that bad as cultural things go.
Especially in terms of like the giant thing of Homo sapiens, even not just the larger scale. Yes.
And that world model shifting to human beings are bastards that live in hell. Then you say, okay, well, we're doing okay for that, right? Mm-hmm. There are actually some green shoots of hope, right? Compared to how bad it could be, given how bad our history is, compared to how bad it is for the poorest and most unfortunate of us. Mm. Actually, the parts of the system that work okay really work pretty well under the circumstances. And what that helped me to do was differentiate between what was acceptable and unacceptable. Yes. Like, I stopped judging people for being imperfect. Right? Actually, for a bastard that lives in hell, he's a pretty good guy. Right? And then you could look at the people that were really exploiting the hell out of the situation and were kind of inherently evil, versus the people that were doing the best they could and were basically just struggling in a world which was really not very good.
Oh, that's a good way to reframe it.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it was a bit like adjusting contrast on a camera. Mm. Right? You adjust the aperture, mm-hmm. and it was that everything was underexposed and everything was kind of like Gotham colored.
Yes.
Because if you think it's meant to be like, we're nice people and we live in a civilized place. If we're civilized people and we live in a nice place, we were failing that grade so comprehensively that the world looks terrible.
Right.
By, civilized people that live in a nice place standards, wow, this is awful.
Because it's not that. Yeah.
Right? And then when I looked at it more from the, okay, so we're bastards that live in hell, it's actually, we're kind of doing okay. For those kinds of people in that kind of a place, we're actually getting our heads together in a fairly comprehensive way and we're beginning to change our conditions.
Right.
And again, I think this comes back to the colonial mythology. Right? The colonial mythology was kill people and take their stuff. Right? That is not civilized people that live in a nice place behavior. Mm-hmm. But, there was this kind of Freudian covering over the hellishness of the colonial business model with this artificial pretend niceness. The kind of Victorian primness. Oh, yes. Don't ask us what happens in the colonies where all the money is made. Over here, we're all absolutely upright and genteel.
Because we can put on a suit and a monocle or something and look the part that you're saying.
And so they just kind of draw this veil over where the actual money is coming from.
Absolutely.
And, civilized people that live in a nice place was the upper class mythology. And then we all sort of bought into that when we got things like indoor plumbing.
Oh, yes.
Right? Yes. And actually, the truth of the situation is that we are actually absolute bastards that live in hell, and we can improve the situation by being less ruthless, mm-hmm. and by accepting that the world is kind of hellish and doing something about it. Mm-hmm. Right? And that, if there was a single message, I hate to say it, but the single message is, we're absolute bastards and we live in hell, and we have the moral and intellectual capability to improve in our conditions and our natures, and we have to. Mm. Because otherwise we will remain stuck in this mess.
Yes.
Right? And it's not that we were civilized people that lived in a nice place and then we screwed it up and it became horrible. It's that we deluded ourselves into thinking that things were okay when they never had been, and that delusion has cost us 50 or 100 years of progress. Right? If we had actually stuck with the knitting, if we'd stayed close to the hard truth that we are not very nice and the world is really difficult, then we could have been so much more efficient at using technological progress to produce human welfare and solve human problems.
Right.
And indeed, all problems, not just human anymore, because now we run the biosphere too.
Yes.
Right? That thing where we replaced all of our animals with freaking cows.
Burning the Amazon for the pastures and stuff.
Oh, the horror, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of look at that and you can't square it with, the civilized people that live in a nice place story.
Yeah.
Right? So we're clinging to civilized people that live in a nice place, and it's making it almost impossible for us to act on our real problems. Mm. Right? I think we really need this kind of collective awakening of actually, we are bad people that live in a bad world, and with effort we can improve.
Well, what I would say is don't look up. look around.
Mm.
Look around and find your fellow human beings. Find your tribe. Find your friends, family, people whom you truly care for. And show that you care, because it is the mutually caring relationships that is the foundation from which we can build the new world. That's what I would say. Don't look up, look around.
The most important thing is, one of the biggest qualities I appreciate in people is their ability to listen to someone else. Not just waiting for their turn to speak, but to actually listen and, maybe take a moment to think about what the other person says. And I think it would be a much better world if everybody was doing that, even, trying to do that. You can't succeed always, but, try to put yourself in someone else's shoes. Totally. And if you can do that or even try to do that, we will be fine, I think.
Look up Karezza.
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 Okay.
This may not be exactly the same thing, but it's kind of in the neighborhood. I'm thinking about science fiction and weird philosophy, which you've talked about a lot.
Of course.
Right. So one of the things that I really like about philosophy and science fiction, and the weirder the better for this, is it's knocking you out of your narrow kind of day-to-day provincial, this is how the world is.
Yep.
Right? So you read some weird ancient Chinese philosopher who has a very different view of things. You're like, whoa, I guess you don't have to see the world the way I usually do, right? There have been other people who've seen it very differently, right? Or if you think about various science fiction scenarios, right? Wow, an alien could have a totally different way of thinking, or people in a different, you could have a totally different kind of utopian or dystopian society, right? And that, I think the philosophy and science fiction both have this potential to really broaden your sense of the possibility of human experience.
Right.
And the possibility of maybe non-human experience too, right? Knock you out of that kind of, home, work, family circle, where you're doing all the same things and you're talking with people who are basically like you all the time and share your opinions, and that kind of, I like the weirdness and the wonder and the sense of perspective you can get from going as far as possible toward the strangest stuff in psychology and philosophy and speculative fiction.
Right.
And that might be a little bit like what the astronauts
Yeah.
see. I don't know, maybe not, but to some extent.